Okay, so it's 1 o'clock. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Aviva Gutnick, the education editor at Behrman House, and with me today to co-present is Abra Lee. Currently, she is the Director of Youth Learning and Engagement at Temple Emanu-El in Westfield, New Jersey. Soon, she's going to be returning to Bnai Jeshurun in Short Hills. This is the third of our June webinar series. Our previous two sessions covered the prayer curriculum Hebrew and Harmony and Hebrew primers. We are recording today's session, and at the later this week I will be sending out the recording to all of you, and when I do, I will also include links to recordings of the previous two sessions so that you can watch them yourselves or share them with Hebrew teachers that you know. There are quite a number of people on today from all over the country, and I want to acknowledge the diversity of roles that you're in. We have with us school directors, youth directors, teachers, and representatives of various camp and other community organizations. So welcome everyone, and thank you for being with us. Today we're here to talk about teaching Judaics in a remote setting on Zoom and on any other video conference platforms. If you would like to reach out to Abra and me, here is our contact information. In our 45 minutes together, we are going to touch on what you see as the opportunities as you're planning for next year. We're also going to take a look at teaching Judaics in remote environments and how the content lends itself to various interactions for learners. We're going to look at the new digital turn page materials and demo how to use them to engage students. And we're going to use Israel It's Complicated just as an example today. Then we will hear from Abra about her experiences building community and how she was able to spin her school's Judaics lessons this spring when the building closed. Then I'm going to show you how to access the new turn page materials, and we'll close with questions and answers. I just want to let you all know that your video and audio is turned off for this session. So if you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat panel and be sure that you're writing to all attendees and not just the panelists so that everyone can benefit from your question. Let's start by taking a quick poll. I want you to experience how a Zoom poll works in case you haven't done one before. So I'm going to show you a question and ask you to choose just one answer. What's one thing you're most looking forward to in this shifting learning environment? I'll give you a few seconds to read through that.
Aviva, I posted your contact information in the chat again for those who are asking.
Thanks, Abra.
Got it.
You can also post yours as well there too, Abra, while we're here. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds. Oh, I love seeing all the responses come in. That's great. I'm going to share them with you in just a second. Okay, so I am going to end the poll right now, and it's lovely to see 85% of you voted, so that's a great response rate. I wish we always got such good response rates for everything. I'm going to end the poll, and what I'm going to do, let's take a look at the results. So this is really interesting. So I asked what you were most looking forward to in this environment, and it looks like 32% said you're looking forward to trying new teaching strategies. Interesting. Learning new technologies, easier ways to share media resources, and a spattering of others. Fantastic. This is great. I'm going to stop sharing the poll results. I think we get the idea here. And let me close this. So I titled the poll Silver Linings because I don't know if any of you noticed that there was a title to the top of the poll. And I called it Silver Linings because I think it's useful, it's really useful to think about the possibilities and opportunities, even now, even in this really odd environment. So we know that many of you are facing questions around programming and staffing, structural questions. There's just so much uncertainty about what next year's school will look like. And because there's so many unknowns and so many possible scenarios, we know that that makes planning really, really hard. So you might find yourself questioning how to build or maintain social connections if you're not learning together in person. You might also be asking what kind of learning experience your students will have in a remote environment or a hybrid environment. And perhaps you might even have more limited time with students, and how is that going to affect your curriculum? These are all really interesting questions to explore when it comes to Judaics. Whereas Hebrew is more of a concrete skill, and learning it is in some ways less reliant on social connections. Judaics is more about the neshama, the doing, the being, that's often the core of religious school education. So how do you do that on Zoom? In general, there are 3 types of interactions for learners. There's interaction with content, with a teacher, and with other learners. And we're going to see how those 3 are all integrated parts of the whole learning experience with the new Behrman House digital materials. So we have a variety of materials for Judaics learning, from Torah to holidays, values, character Israel, and more, for a variety of ages. Most of you, I'm sure, know the quality of our materials and have trusted them for many years. What we've done now is to transform some of our most popular materials into digital turn-page versions that you can use anywhere your teachers and students are located. So really, you can spend your time thinking about how to teach instead of what to teach. If you're already using our Judaics materials, it will be a fairly seamless transition to new turn-page materials. If you're not using them, thank you for your interest, and we will be following up with you later this week. So let's take a look. I am going to use Israel It's Complicated as an example. What you're looking at is Israel It's Complicated as a turn-page version for your teachers to share with students in a remote setting. I'm going to demo how to use this in a second. I just want to show you what this looks like. Below the turn-page material on the bottom is a teacher's guide, downloadable, with tips and techniques for teaching this material on Zoom. So each of the Judaics turn-page versions that we're creating has its own unique teacher's guide specific to the material. The teacher's guide also includes ways to move between in-person and online teaching of the material. Next to it is an icon for some downloadable student printables. And these are select pages from each lesson or chapter that students can use between sessions. Let's take a look inside the turn page. It's an exact duplicate of the physical book. It has the same page numbers, the same everything. You can zoom in, you can move around, you can zoom. If you use Zoom, there are a lot of tools built into the functionality. So you could annotate, you can draw things like that, depending what you want to highlight. Oops, I'm still in annotate. Okay, so let's see how you might use the turn page material for some activated, engaging lessons. I'm going to use Israel It's Complicated today as an example, but what I'm going to be showing you in terms of the tips are things that you could be extrapolated for whatever materials you're using. So let's look at a few ways to engage students through the content. So number one is share your screen. So you can share pages from the turn page and lead a photo response activity using the photos on this page. So here, for example, you might tell students to look at the pictures of Israelis on these pages and ask what they notice about the people. Depending on the size of your group, you could have students respond in the chat panel, or you could unmute them so that they can speak and share. You could ask what the students guess about the people in the photos based on what they're wearing. And that could lead to a discussion about what others might think of you based on what you're wearing. Sharing a screen also means that you can use external sites too, like Google Maps or videos or infographics. For the Israel It's Complicated course, we have compiled supplemental resources like videos and songs that correspond to each lesson. And in Zoom, it's really easy to make good use of those resources. And, you know, truthfully, we often hear from many educators that technology is sometimes a complicating factor when you're in your classroom, in your physical building, whether it's Wi-Fi or lack of access to technology. And so when you're on Zoom or another video conference platform, you have some freedom in terms of being able to share external resources that you might not so easily otherwise. You can also use breakout rooms, which is a Zoom functionality. The Israel It's Complicated material, for example, has an activity called Talk About It. And you can use this breakout room functionality to foster a discussion among students in small groups. So you might share a page from the turn page book on screen that includes an overview of the issue or the topic. And then you could send groups to breakout rooms to discuss, maybe with a madrich or madricha. And if you want, then regroup and share highlights that way. Another fun thing that you can do to engage students with content is use your virtual background. So, you know, this is the Israel It's Complicated example. So let's say we were going to do a lesson or session where we're looking at different sites in Israel, different places. So in advance of the session, load some photos, famous Israeli sites to your Zoom account, have one ready like this, everybody know where we are, where we're visiting today, and make a game of it and see how many they can guess correctly. Afterward, you could visit the tourist site links that are in chapter 9 of the book, and they could bring back some new fun facts about, you know, about the place that they visit and share with the whole class. So you can have a lot of fun with virtual backgrounds. We're going to leave Israel momentarily, unfortunately, and we're back. So as you can see, Judaics in a remote environment lends itself to all sorts of creative activities. I just gave you a few really quick ideas for engaging your learners with the content and with you and with each other. There are many more that involve things like art and movement and scavenger hunts. And if you have a particularly successful way that you've used Zoom or another video conference platform for teaching or learning, I invite you to share it with us in the chat panel so other people can get some ideas from you as well. So now I'd like to turn it over to Abra. She's going to share with us some of her experiences in her school.
Thanks, Aviva. I wanted to also just acknowledge there are quite a few questions regarding different features in Zoom, and Zoom has some really outstanding support with tutorials and how-to videos. That is how we learned a lot right up front. So maybe we'll take the summer to explore a little bit more about what's available to us. So I want to just take a very brief moment to give you an overview of our our particular synagogue school. And for those of you who are with us in the first time, a little bit of this will be a repeat. You will receive a recording of the first video, the first webinar, so that you can get a little bit more detail, and you're welcome to contact me if you have more specific questions about our institution. So we are a large suburban congregation of approximately 975 families. We have over 500 students enrolled in our school in kindergarten through 12th grade. Most of our grades do meet either once a week, bi-monthly, or monthly, and our 4th and 5th grade meet twice a week for both Hebrew and Judaics. Our priority goal at Temple Emanu-El has always been community building and relationship building, and we wanted to maintain that during this period of remote learning. When we first moved into our remote learning plan, we expected it would be temporary, and we decided that it was very important for us to prioritize connection over content. Mostly because we had learned from some of our secular school districts from which we pull our students that they were not having synchronous learning. There was not a lot of video learning happening at the time, and our students were becoming very isolated from one another and from their teachers and from their friends. So we took our time together in our sacred community to help them to feel connected to others. When it became clear that the stay-at-home orders would not be lifting anytime soon, and we would probably be completing the school year remotely, we shifted to a mindset of connection through content. I apologize for the background noise. It appears that one of my children is printing a paper to the printer in my office. In shifting to this mindset of connection through content, we recognized that we could think about what we really wanted to do, and that was to build a Jewish community and to build relationships among our learners. And we pulled from our content and our curriculum maps what we believe would really help us to push that goal and advance that goal forward, which meant that we reorganized our priorities a little bit around content learning. And in this remote learning period, we have really come to rethink what our priorities are and what things are essential in teaching and learning in a Jewish environment in the new world in which we're living. We created a combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning. And whenever it was possible for the asynchronous learning, we tried to create some video tutorials. And we did that just by getting on with faculty and staff and by demonstrating in a Zoom meeting how you would access some of the apps or how we would use different websites for the asynchronous learning. And we recorded those meetings and then shared the recordings of those meetings. For synchronous learning, we recognized that it was very important for us to think differently about the schedule of school and to increase our communication so that we could be nimble and we could pivot. Rather than a monthly blast with everything that the parents would need to know for this month, we sent out weekly blasts, enabling us to modify the schedule and send out new Zoom links for each week, so that as we were learning, we were able to shift pretty quickly. We recognized that we needed to stagger the learning in order to accommodate families with multiple children. We didn't want to make assumptions around how many devices there might be in a house. We also scheduled, while staggering the schedule, our youngest learners for the earliest times because the little people get out of bed much earlier. We invited all of the families to come together for tefillah and shira with our clergy, and we made sure that over the course of a day or a session that we broke around meal times to acknowledge that families are together in different ways than they were before. So we made sure that our day-long programming broke and there was no programming typically between 12:30 and 1:30 to enable people to have lunch together. And then once again at dinner time, we did that. Resources became particularly important when people could no longer walk into each other's offices and grab some books off a shelf or do a quick Google search and share with one another. So we created some shared documents and we invited the teachers also as they were doing their research to go ahead and to add to a Google Sheet. We also were in touch with other schools in our area to find out what resources could be pooled and share those with our faculty. So when thinking about what we were going to be teaching, we wanted to make sure that we stayed focused on our goal of community building and relationship building and maintaining those connections. And then we used our content as a starting point for planning the remote learning of connection through content. And I'm going to share 2 examples with you. In our primary grade Judaics curriculum, we want to enable our little learners to be able to see their world through a Jewish lens, using stories, traditions, and teaching acts of love and kindness. And one example was from the holiday curriculum. We use Let's Celebrate, and having the materials at home, our teachers would hold up the folders so that the students could see them. Now we'll have all of these wonderful flip book available to us. We had the teachers teach the content of Pesach, and then that afternoon we got together for a model Seder in place of Tefillah and Shirah. In advance, we emailed families a list of what they would have if they wanted to set up their own space. And we were very careful to invite families to join us with some of those items, all of those items, or none of those items, recognizing that in this time when people had stay-at-home orders, when it was difficult to get our hands on certain things, we were using all sorts of substitutions. But we didn't want anyone to feel like they couldn't join if they didn't have those items at home. We set up a model table in full view of the Zoom camera, and that enabled those who didn't have the items to be able to see what we were modeling. And we used a PowerPoint Haggadah that we created through screen sharing. The following class, we asked the children to think about what was one of their favorite family rituals or traditions that they celebrated during Passover, and to bring a ritual object that represented that to our next Zoom class. And by doing so, it helped the teachers to get a little glimpse into the families, and it helped the students to get to know one another. And it was also really great to actively engage the learners in teaching one another about their own family rituals. In our older grades, for 5th grade, for example, we are teaching about what it means to live a Jewish life through taking what we've learned about our history and how that informs who we are today, and putting all of the things that we've learned about our mitzvot and how to live a Jewish life into action from this pre-adolescent mindset. In our Jewish history curriculum, we talked about coming to America, and we had just come to this point around the remote learning period starting, and we invited students in advance to find a family heirloom and an object that would represent what their family history is. And then we invited them to learn a little bit from their family. Many of them called grandparents to learn more about ritual objects and where they came from. So it engaged the whole family in the learning and enabled some other social content and connection for them. And then they came and told us about the object, where it came from, to whom it belongs, and to share a little bit about how they came to be where they are and how their family's Jewish journey has impacted that. On another lesson, we had a scavenger hunt. This was not prepared in advance. We brought all the students into the Zoom, and we talked a little bit about our topic of Shalom Bayit. This was a way of connecting to prior learning. We had just started in our Hebrew and Harmony, the Birchot Shalom unit, and we talked about the idea of peace. In our Judaics class, we talked about Shalom Bayit and what that looks like. And then we invited students to leave their cameras on, to mute themselves, to head out into their houses on a scavenger hunt to find one object that they felt would represent Shalom Bayit. And in our content classes, we try really hard to help the students think about symbolism and metaphor when they're unpacking and learning the content of prayer. So this became really very natural for them. Students came back with violins, and they shared how their music lesson was disrupting their brother who was in a math tutoring session, and so how the family had to work out how they would schedule who was live and who needed a little bit more quiet time at certain times. We had another student who came with a very big set of a headset with a mic, and she talked about how she learned that when she was watching videos for her school classes, her secular school classes, how it was disturbing her parents who were working in the next room. And so she said that Shalom Bayit comes when everybody can work in a quiet space in their own way. So it was really interesting for us to get a glimpse into our students' lives, and to think a little bit about how we could use our content to move forward that goal of community building and making sure that we had connections through our content areas. It helped us to get to know each other in a little bit of a better way, and it created a safe space for students to share some more personal information about themselves. But what's really nice is that it made the Jewish learning real and took everything outside of the walls of the synagogue, and created some new sacred spaces out and about in our community. I'm happy to talk a little bit more about any of our curricular areas and the structure of the school if anyone wants to get in touch with me afterward.
Abra, thank you so much, Abra, for sharing that. Really, really interesting and informative. There was one question specific to what you were just talking about that came in about the scavenger hunt and what ages you think that that's appropriate for, and whether the older kids find that, too babyish, childish, or whether they're able to engage with it in a fun way.
We did scavenger hunts for our K-1 group, for our 5th grade group, and for our teens. We actually did some really funny things for our teens, and they were more icebreaker activities like go find a green sock and come back with a green sock. And it was just a silly way to get them moving, and we didn't find that they were too cool for school.
Okay, thank you. I had seen that come in as you were chatting, so good to get that out. What I'd like to do now is show you how you actually get and access the turn page version. So let me do this. Okay, the access to the turn page version is not something you get in an app, or it's not an app. You go to our website, behrmanhouse.com, and you'll see we have these tabs across the top here. It says New, Jewish Learning and Life, Hebrew, and so on. Under the Jewish Learning and Life, you'll see there's a little section here that says Judaica Turn Page Access and Coming Soon. The coming soon is July, early July. There will be a list of all the titles available that you would see here. You would purchase it as you would for any of our other materials that you have gone through the process of before. So you must be logged into your account just like you would to purchase anything else. I'm getting some noticing the screen is blank. Abra, can you confirm that you can see what I'm sharing? Okay, thank you. So the listing would be here. You find what you're looking for, you make your purchase. Then afterward, you go to, see where it says account right up here on the top, and you click that. And then down the left, there's this line that says My Downloadable Products. I'm sorry, I'm seeing a lot of people saying that they're having trouble seeing anything. But I'm not sure why. It looks like it's sharing, so I apologize for those who are having trouble seeing it. Perhaps when we share the recording later, you'll be able to see the missing pieces, or you can try refreshing your screen as well. So you go to My Downloadable Products, and it takes you to the list of all the items that you've purchased that are downloadable. So here's Israel It's Complicated, for example. You click here for the link, and it will bring you right to the turn page. It's here on the screen, and then the link is what you would share with any teachers who are working with a student on that material. One important thing to know, there were some questions about this, and I'm glad you asked, is that access to the turn page version is purchased on it's a per student basis. So for example, if you have 10 students and one teacher in a class, you would purchase access for 10 students. And that includes a teacher's guide and the select student printable pages that you're able to see in that window. The link to the turn page version can then be shared with any teacher who's working directly with those students at no extra charge. So you are not paying extra for the teachers. I see a lot of questions coming in, and we're going to turn to that right now. So before we go to the questions, I want to thank Abra for joining us today again. It's always lovely partnering with you, and we appreciate you giving us your time today.
My pleasure.
Okay, so let's go to some of the questions. There were some questions about, I saw a question earlier about the difference between the teacher guide, the hard copy teacher guide, and the one that is included here in the turn page version. The PDF downloadable version that's available as part of the turn page is not the same as the printed teacher guide with fully scripted out lesson plans. What it is some suggestions and tips for using this material in remote learning environments. So those hard copy teacher guides are much more robust and filled with lots of activities from soup to nuts, from page 1 through page whatever 48 of the student book. The PDF version is really for how to use this material in a remote learning environment, with suggestions like how to adapt an activity that might not work the same when you're remote as opposed to being in person. So things like virtual backgrounds, that was from the downloadable teacher guide. In Israel, it's complicated. You're not going to see that in the printed one, obviously. There were also some questions I saw about the pricing. So the price for each of the turn page versions is going to differ slightly based on what the student book is typically priced at, and the prices run anywhere from $9.95 to something to $14.95, depending on what the material is, or if it's a packet of folders versus a book. In general, the price for the turn page version is going to be about $1 to $2 more than the hard copy book. And what you're getting for that is a physical copy of the book plus access to the turn page version. I hope that answers the pricing questions. Some people are asking about the titles and which titles are available. So I will share the complete list with you in the email that I sent you later this week, along with the recording of today's session. It is available somewhere on our website, but I don't have it at the ready to be able to share in the chat, but I will be sending you the list. And there is a range of ages. So somebody had asked about the K-2 Let's Discovers, and yes, some of the Let's Discovers will be made into turn page versions all the way up through, I'm looking at my list, things for 6th graders, 7th graders, and so on. So it's a bit of a range.
Aviva,
yes.
Also some of the teen materials have things that really naturally work easily when teaching via Zoom and screen sharing. For example, we've used today's hot topics and more of today's hot topics, and there are some suggested video links and YouTube videos that go with some of those ethical discussions for the teens, and you can very simply pull up the video and screen share it.
Yeah, thank you. That's right. Thank you for saying so. Some questions is, if you only want the digital version, can that be purchased individually? So you're not buying the digital version. You're essentially buying a subscription to use the turn page materials with a certain number of students for the school year. And it is time limited for the 2020-2021 school year. What matters is how many people are viewing it, not how many people are showing it. So it is 1 per student. The digital version, the turn page version is not a standalone thing. It's part of the learning experience for what you're teaching during the year. And particularly, if you think that you are likely to be online, in person, hybrid, or some kind of changing back and forth throughout the school year, having your students have the printed material is going to give them the best learning outcomes, because it will enable consistency. They'll be able to have the materials no matter where they are. What other questions am I seeing here? Israel, it's complicated. Is it recently published? Would it be okay for grade 5? Yes, Israel, it's complicated was published last year, this time last year. Would it be okay for grade 5? I believe so. I mean, you know your students better than I do. I don't know your students. It was designed for grades 6 and 7, but I do know of several schools that are using it in grade 5, so absolutely. I see you will be able to send books to children's homes. How will that work? In terms of how will you get the books to students? So there are 4 ways that I can think of off the top of my head for how that could work. So 1, you could purchase all the materials for your students, organize them into, I don't know, let's say packets or packages for your students, and then have a book pickup day, some sort of, scheduled system with tables laid out, and the students come and pick up their materials to take home with them. You could mail them to students. You could do that yourself. One thing that my son's teachers did, which was quite lovely earlier this year, they hand-delivered, well, not hand-delivered, stoop-delivered, I should say, or porch-delivered material. So it was a sort of personal delivery combined with a little bit of a socially distant, yet really personal experience. And also, Behrman House is planning to do a book sending service if you are not able to get the materials to your students directly. So we're developing, this is something that's in development, currently in formation, and for a reduced shipping fee, we would send the books out directly if you send us a spreadsheet with names and addresses. So we are working on that, and as soon as we have all the details worked out, we will definitely be passing along that information to you. There are questions. Does that mean each student gets a hard copy book or just one hard copy book? You are purchasing this per student. So if you're working with one student, if you're a tutor and you're working with one student, you would buy it's a package. So the student gets the hard copy book, and the teacher gets the link to share the digital version on their screen. If you have a class of 10 students, you purchase access for those 10 students, and each of those 10 students gets a copy of the book. I'm scrolling through the questions here. I see several questions about welcome to Israel. Will it become a turn page? So as I said, I will be sending out the complete list as we have it so far of titles that will be available in turn page. If there is something that you are looking for in a turn page and you don't see it on my list, please send us that information. And if we get enough requests for something, we will certainly consider it. This is obviously something that is developing and changing. The titles that we chose were based on our most popular titles. Certainly, if there are enough people who are interested in something, we will consider it. If we already have books, can we purchase the turn page digital usage? If you have books left over from last year, or if you have already purchased books for this coming fall, we will work with you to figure something out if you've already made those purchases. Will I have Explorer's Bible? Yes, Explorer's Bible 1 and 2 is going to be available in turn page. Can we get turn page over the summer so teachers can prepare? Yes, the turn page versions will be available beginning early July. I don't want to give out the wrong date. I believe it's July 1, but I'm not 100% positive. I do know it is early July. So this is not in place of hard copies, but in addition to hard copies. Correct. Think of it as an enhanced learning experience. You would normally be buying hard copies for your students to have in your classroom, on, let's say, a typical school year. What we've done is make these books available in a digital format so that the teacher can share their screen with students just for a better learning experience overall. It's not a replacement, it's an addition to. So you don't need to buy an extra copy of the book and turn page for teachers. That is correct. You do not need to purchase anything extra for the teachers. Will there be a link on the home page of all the turn page options. Yes, there will be a link on our website for all the turn page materials. If there's a change of enrollment, is it easy to increase or decrease? Yes, absolutely. You're essentially purchasing on a per student basis. So if you have additional students, you would purchase for those additional students, no problem. A lot of questions about welcome to Israel. We've noted that. Thank you for putting that in there.
Aviva, there seem to be a lot of questions about age appropriateness, like where some of these materials belong. Does that still exist in the website, where there used to be sort of a scope and sequence, but also what the intended grade level is?
Yes, I am looking at I believe, I'm not sure I want to spend the time digging around our website at the moment, but on our home page, there are several places I can point you to for some more information. So right on our home page, and I'm going to share my screen real quick so I can show you. Right on our home page is this feature called Plan. And if you go here, there is a lot of material here to sift through. There is a lot of information about planning your goals and curriculum guides, and those are organized by age and topic. And that is, I'll show you again, that's from our homepage. Right here on the front, it's called Plan. So I think that should cover what most people are looking for. And if you, look, if you have specific questions and you're not finding what you are looking for on the website, get in touch with us, please. We're happy to help you as best we can. I'm on Behrman House. When I click turn page, we can't find products matching the selection. That's because they're not available yet. We are hard at work getting everything ready, and they will be available as of early July. The one I showed you was just for demo purposes only, but rest assured that they will be there in the coming weeks. I just want to point out that we do have a few turn page materials available for Hebrew. We're not talking about Hebrew today, and there will be more added in the Hebrew section as well. But none of the Judaica materials are currently available. Give us about 3 weeks.
Aviva, I'm reading the questions, and there's a couple questions about licensing for teachers. So if you have 20 students and you purchase 20, do you need to purchase 21 so the teacher has access also?
No, you do not need to purchase anything extra for the teacher. That's our gift to you.
And that, I think the question was specifically about something that was discussed earlier. So for example, we typically have a license for our teachers for the apps. But that's different here with these term pages. Is that correct?
Repeat that question. I
think there was a question in the chat that previously it was discussed that you would need a license for a teacher. So for example, in the app, if you did Shalom Hebrew, for example, and you wanted your teacher to have access to it as well, you would need a license for the teacher. This is different for the term page.
Yeah, so the turn page is not an app. They're wholly different things. Turn page is access to an exact copy of a physical book, my little marks here, that you can share on screen. Some of our Hebrew materials also have a companion app that's part of the curriculum that's totally separate from the turn page materials. There may have been some information given out in earlier sessions about whether you need to purchase for teachers. I don't recall what that information was, and there may have been some miscommunication about that, but you do not have to purchase separate access for teachers. You are purchasing access for the number of students that you're going to be sharing this material with.
There's a question, if we are not brick to click in the fall and we have to start with a full new group of students in remote learning and community building and relationship building. And I will say that we found, for the most part, a lot of what we have been able to do in person, we've been doing in Zoom. So if you would have a small group of students working to get to know each other, to create a skit, it's some bonding thing, you could also do that in a breakout room, and you could have your teens serving as madrichim and send them to a breakout group. So there's still some supervision if there's one teacher in a classroom and you need 4 groups, for example. So a lot of the same things that we're doing in person, we'll be able to do via Zoom. You just need to learn the technology, and Zoom has really good resources on their website to teach you how to do that.
Okay, thank you. There's a question, will there be a time limit on the turn page? Yes, it's for the 2020-2021 school year. So it's a 1-year access to the materials, as you would be purchasing materials for every new school year. Do we need to pay for madrichim access? In this scenario, it depends if, are you defining them as teachers or students? Teachers, you don't need to purchase separate access for. So I mean, I think it depends on how you treat your madrichim. If you're using them as teachers, then no, you do not need to purchase separate access for them. Okay, I just want to do a quick time check. It's now 1:46. I apologize that we're a minute over. So if you need to leave, we will send you a complete recording of the session, including all the questions that are coming up in the chat. So we thank you for joining us. We'll also be sending out a written summary as well with the recording. Abra and I will stay on for a few minutes longer to answer some more questions. I'm seeing a lot of thank yous. You're very welcome. Will there be new items added to the OLC section? This is not related to the OLC at all. I want to make that clear. Students do not need any accounts to access any of this. This is entirely independent of the Online Learning Center. So students,
I'm adding my contact again in the chat.
Oh, good. Thank you for doing that. So students will keep hard copies of the books. Yes, students get and keep the hard copies of the books. They can use them at home to follow along. You can use them in so many different ways, get them off the screen, you know, doing things in between sessions. And then when you go back to in person, or if you're doing some kind of fluid transition between back and forth, they have all the materials they need for this coming school year. Thank you. Ray is one of my Behrman House colleagues, pointed out that if you, in the top bar on the Behrman House homepage, this is in reference to the question about the age appropriateness and how to find materials for specific ages. If you hover over the different categories like Hebrew and Jewish learning and life, they are also organized and sorted by age. So that's another option for finding what you need for particular ages. Thank you, Ray.
Aviva, can you just clarify, if you have one particular page in the flipbook that you want to share, are those pages individually linked, or do you need to send the flipbook with a particular page noted so that someone can jump to that page?
They are not. You can't jump to a specific page, but the link goes to the entire book. It's essentially a digital replica of the physical book. So, you know, if you have the physical book in front of you, you know that the page you're looking for is, I don't know, page 23, and then the little bar right on top, you just type 23, and it does jump if you know the page number that you want to go to.
So Marlo, the experience that we had with our Siddur, which was in a flipbook version, was that the physical Siddur page numbers do not necessarily correspond to the PDF or the flipbook page numbers. They're page numbers specific because of the way books are numbered. So you would need to know in advance what number in your flipbook you're going to. For example, page 23 may be page 25 or 27, depending on how many pages there are, physical pages in the book prior to that, which would be numbered in a PDF or in a flipbook version, but not numbered in a hard copy published book.
The Judaic materials that we are converting digital, they're an exact replica in terms of page numbers. The Hebrew, of course, obviously, you'll have to turn from right to left, but they also do match up, I believe. There's a question about, is the turn page only functioning on Zoom? No, what you're getting is a link, and the link can be used in whatever video conference screen sharing platform you're using. Zoom is the one that we're using today, and the one that I demoed in. That seems to be the platform that many schools are using, of course, not all. And the turn page functions it's a link. So whatever you can use to share screens with your students, it will work. To clarify, are we paying for books as well as the digital access? Yes, it is a package. You get both. These books are not PDFs. Correct, they are not PDFs. They are available. They're just for sharing on screen. When will the list of books be out? The list of books is something that I'm going to be sending to you in the next couple of days. Once I get the recording for today's session, I will be including a list of all the books that are available or that will be available. Are they downloadable at all onto a hard drive? The turn page is not, it's not downloadable. It's just for sharing on a screen. What is downloadable is the built-in teacher guide unique to that specific title and some select student printables. Those are downloadable PDFs. You can save them wherever, onto your, onto your desktop, onto, any place and print them out, or send them out to students for printing at home. But the turn page itself is not a downloadable. Let's see, I'd like to cover as many questions as possible. Just please show an example of the PDF at the bottom of the chapter page. Okay, I will do that. Hang on one second. I will share my screen. Okay, so we had a question about what the download looks like. So what you see here, this is the turn page version. This is the teacher PDF. I'm going to click it, and it is 5 pages long. It includes some information about this particular course, which is Israel It's Complicated. And I want you to know it will look different for each set of materials. This particular one I'm showing you is unique to Israel It's Complicated. So this is an explanation about the course itself and the materials that are part of that curriculum. It includes tips for how to use this material in video conference learning environment. It gives some examples. What else? Several pages of examples. There are links for more information down at the bottom. So that is the Israel It's Complicated one. I can also share with you the student printables. These are specific pages. It's usually 1 or 2 pages per chapter or per lesson, depending on how the course is organized, that you can send to students in case they don't happen to have their hard copy book with them. Something to do in between sessions. And it's 1 or 2 pages per chapter. And these are PDF downloads. As you'll see, the page number, there was page 5. This goes to page 19, page 23, and a listing right up top of which pages are included here as printables. So it's a sampling. It's not it's definitely not a replacement for the book by any means. I hope that answers the question. Abra, here's a note to you. It says, did you have full attendance with Zoom? I work for a public school and a synagogue program. Our attendance dropped in half. The families that find Judaica Hebrew a priority had their children join weekly and others did not. Can you speak about your lessons learned related to attendance?
I would say we had a mixed bag. We have some students from families who have traditionally had really low attendance, particularly seasonally, when their sports seasons change. And there are students who we never would have seen in the spring because baseball and soccer, and we saw them pretty regularly. We also have students who we saw regularly for whom remote learning just was a real challenge. Parents were working full time, so it was a mixed bag. We overall had really good attendance, and we used attendance monitoring as a way, again, for relationship building and checking in. We've missed seeing Johnny on Zoom the last 2 weeks. We want to make sure that everyone's okay, and if there's anything about which we should be aware, or if there's something about which we could be helpful, to please let us know. Parents mostly appreciated the reach out, and we learned a lot of really interesting things about relatives who were dealing with pastoral issues that came up that the congregation otherwise might not have been aware of.
Thanks, Abra. Harley, you asked about are all printables in the hard copies. Yes, the printables are select pages from the hard copy book itself. We just picked a few select ones to make available as PDF downloads. Teacher tips. We have some questions about the teacher tips. They are designed with some specific lessons plus some additional ideas for adapting the lessons in the book. Thank you, Vicki. I feel like we have covered, I'm looking through the list of questions that I had seen. I think we have covered the various topics.
And we can save the chat, and any questions that we may not have been able to get to, we can go back and answer in the follow-up email.
Absolutely. So with that, I just want to let you know that we did record today's session, and we are saving the chat. We will send this to you later in the week, along with recordings from our other 2 sessions that we did on Hebrew. One was specifically on Hebrew and Harmony, and there was another one on Hebrew primers. And we are considering offering some other webinars later in the summer. So if you have specific ideas or things that you would like us to address, you can either put it in the chat or reach out to us and let us know, and stay tuned to your inbox for more information. And with that, I want to thank you for spending almost an hour with us today, and good luck as the summer goes on. Stay healthy and be well, everyone. Thank you.